Hello, my name is Chris Beauchamp and I'm a mobile engineer with KeyCloud, and this is the third and final part in our video series called Tips, Tricks, and Tools for App Store Success. As a quick recap for the first two parts in our video series, in part one I went over some general best practices for not only creating your app, but how to optimize your app once it's out in the App Store, giving you the opportunity to compete in the market. I also went over a few tools that can help you build and iterate on your application. In the second part of the video series, I talked about a tool called in-app analytics, which helps you understand not only your application, but your users and how your users are actually using your app. And this is a very powerful tool for optimizing your user flow, coming up with new features, and really learning more about how you can build your app into a real business. We left off in the second part of the video series saying, well, what can we actually do with all of this data? We're app developers, we want to be able to build, we want to be able to iterate based on these results. So in today's part of the video series, I want to talk about how you can actually implement in-app analytics within your app to optimize the app on the fly. So let's go ahead and get into the code. First of all, we're going to be doing an iOS project today, and it's completely open source. And you can find the project at our GitHub page shown here. So we're over here in Xcode, and before we get into the actual code, let's take a look at the program to see what it actually does. Here we have our sample app, and it's a very simple application. It's got a few labels and a big green button in the middle. And all the button is doing is asking for a donation to the developer. So when I created the application, I made the button green because green is my favorite color. But what if my users don't respond well to green? What if they prefer red or blue? It's hard to tell at this stage. So if I were to do traditional A/B testing, what I would need to do is deploy my app with the green button, gather analytics, and see how many people click through. Then I would redeploy my application with a different color button, let's say blue. I would gather the same analytics and then compare them with the original green button click-through rate and see which one worked better. And that's how I would make my design decision. But this is slow, and it can take a lot of time for you to roll out these separate versions and also gather the required number of statistics needed to make an informed decision. So what can we do with in-app analytics to make this process easier? Let's go ahead and take a look at our code. So in this case, what we're trying to do, we have three different color buttons. We have a red button, a green button, and a blue button. And we're going to try to figure out which of these buttons performs best with my users. So first things first, we need to determine the click-through rate for each of these buttons. So here in the first line, we're going to look at how many times has the red button been displayed across all my user base. And this is pulling out of the in-app analytics database in real time. Then what we're going to do is figure out how many times the red button has been clicked. And this will give us a very simple formula to figure out the click-through percentage for our red button. And this is all happening on the fly. Then we're going to figure out the same statistic for our green and finally our blue button. Then what we're going to do is assign different weights to each of these click-through rates and each of these buttons. And the rate is directly proportional to how many times the button has been clicked in relation to how many times it's been displayed. So a higher click-through rate will yield a higher weight. So it's a very simple formula to figure that out. You can get more complex with it, but for the sake of example, I chose to keep this simple. Next, we're going to assign a series of ranges to each of these weights. So each color will have a separate range. Now conceptually, what this will look like is something like this. Now, as you can see, the size of the range is dependent on the click-through rate of each color. So in this case, green has the highest click-through rate, so it's going to have the highest or the largest weight. Then what we're going to do is select a random number within this range. And you can see that line of code right here. And this is essentially throwing a dart at this graphic of ranges that we saw on the last page. And it will randomly select a color, and that will be the color that we choose for our button. Now, of course, since green has the highest click-through rate, it has the largest weight, and it has a slightly better chance of getting selected than the other colors. So in this sense, your application is learning which color will perform best and selecting a color based on these results. Now, the way that this is set up keeps the other colors from being eliminated altogether, but rather it gives the highest click-through rate, the highest chance of being selected. So your app can learn and change all the time. Now, to close out the code that we were talking about, what we're doing here in this block is figuring out where the random number fell. So we're just figuring out the logistics. If it's in the red range, we're going to show the red color. If it's in the green range, we'll show the green. And if it's in the blue range, we'll show the blue button. Now finally, we're going to save these results to our in-app analytics engine so they can be used in future requests. So whichever button color was selected, we're going to save that button color attribute and an event status. So saying that this button was displayed, we're going to save those key value pairs to the analytics backend and save them for later use. Now let's say the donate button was clicked. So our user goes over and clicks the button. Well, first of all, they get this alert box, but in the code, that's where all the interesting things happen. So again, what we're doing is just creating a simple analytics object, which is essentially just key value pairs. And we're saying, okay, the green button was just clicked. So we're going to store the button color and the event status of clicked. And then we're going to store that in our analytics engine. And again, this will factor into future click-through rates when new users open this page or open your application. So this is a very quick and easy to understand example on how in-app analytics can help change your app on the fly and give you very dynamic A/B testing without you having to redeploy your application. And that'll pretty much wrap up this video series. Again, if you missed the first two parts, feel free to check those out at the links below. And also, don't forget to check out our newly released ebook called 5-Star Apps, 10 Keys to Success. And this is a great mobile app developer's guide for creating and iterating your application and then competing once you launch it out into the market. So definitely go check that out, and best of all, it's free. We hope you enjoyed our video series. Feel free to send us any feedback through our website or through the comments below. And don't forget to go to developer.key.com to get started.